Hi, I'm Elizabeth from CIRCA Old Houses, and if you've ever dreamt of buying a big old fixer-upper, then you and I would definitely get along. Now, back in 2013, CIRCA featured as one of our Friday fixer-uppers a 9,000 square foot ginormous house in Emporia, Kansas that needed, let's put it lightly, just a little bit of rehabbing. Well, someone has actually taken this project on, and suffice it to say, he is one truly inspiring person. I am so excited to share with you my interview with the fabulous Ross MacTaggart, who, by the way, has been blogging all about his renovation over at restoringross.com. So without further ado, here's Ross.
So Ross, you are restoring the Cross House, which was built in 1894, correct? And located in Emporia, Kansas.
Mm-hmm,
that's correct. You purchased the house in 2014, and suffice it to say, this house is enormous. Can you just give everyone a brief overview of the house and the project in general?
Well, the house is enormous. It's like scary, frightening big. I occasionally wake up at 3 in the morning with square footage nightmares. It's almost 9,000 square feet spread over 4 levels. All levels are air-conditioned and heated. And one of the reasons that I bought the house is because I have a business restoring vintage lighting, and I have a lot of storage needs. And my storage needs, I need an air-conditioned and heated spaces for all that. And so the fact that the house was so big and it was fully air-conditioned and fully heated, that really actually ended up suiting my needs really well. So the size of the house, which scared most potential buyers, actually was sort of ideal for me. And again, the house was built in 1894. It was a private residence for only a relatively short time, and it's in a neighborhood that I call one of those first-generation neighborhoods, and they were across America. And the neighborhoods were built because they were very close to downtown. And back in the 19th century, of course, people had horses or they walked, so you really wanted to be as close to downtown as possible. And across America, all those first-generation neighborhoods were in decline as soon as the automobile became popular. And now people could live easily much farther away. And so countless neighborhoods like this across America were really largely obliterated. So the neighborhood now, today, it's mixed. I mean, the Cross House is very magnificent and beautiful and wonderful, but, it's across the street from a car wash.
Sure.
And
So you're really seeing this as not just an investment in a house, but an investment in Emporia as a whole as well.
I didn't buy the house because thinking about an investment in Emporia, but now that I've owned it and I've met so many people that are so excited and so enthusiastic, it's actually radically changed my perception of what I'm actually doing. Again, I bought it for me. I bought it for my business. I bought it for a place to live. And now it's like, oh, wow, this is actually bigger than I thought. And I like that, actually. It's nice. It's nice feeling that you're doing something that it's really important to a lot of people. And I've never had a house that, like, the community cared about before. A house is a house. But the Cross House it's one of the largest, and it's certainly the most well-known in town. And when people ask, what house I have, I just mention the big house on the corner of Union with the tower and all the stained glass. And they go, oh, the Cross House, I love that house. So there's tremendous community support in getting the house restored. And it's not looked good for probably in anybody's memory. I mean, it's looked really bad on your own website. I mean, the pictures you have are, slightly terrifying.
Yeah.
And if you look
let me just read. Go on.
No, go on, please.
I was just going to read this direct quote from your blog where you say, most disturbing and altogether terrifying, the house needed a lot of work. However, a ton of work can in no way truly convey the reality of just how much work was required. The projected expense and time required to even make the house livable, much less fully restored, was, yes, terrifying. Terrifying on a profound, shocking, alarming, lock-me-away level. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that? That's just fantastic.
Well, all of that, I still believe all of that.
Okay.
The house, I had been looking for a house for myself and for my business for about 2 years, and I wanted something very sensible, and I talk about this in my first blog post. I was looking for a 1950s mid-century ranch, very large, with a full basement, because again, for all my storage needs. I wanted a brick exterior, I wanted a sensible roof line, and I wanted it in original condition. I didn't mind that it be somewhat faded, but I didn't really want to do a lot of work. I'm incredibly busy. The last thing I needed was a great big project. And of course, what do I buy? I bought the polar opposite of what I spent 2 years looking at. And it was just love. I was so in love with the house, and my realtor is the one that pointed this out. She had been showing me, I had looked at the cross house and I had passed on it in a rare moment of sort of sensibility on my part. And months and months and months and months later, she showed me at the umpteenth property, and I just said, it's just not right. And she said, oh, Ross, she said, just buy the cross house. She said, it's the only thing I've seen you fall in love with. And that that actually just set into motion that little throwaway comment by hers. Literally, I can pinpoint that comment as the beginning of why I ended up buying the house, because she was right. I was completely in love with the house, completely.
And you had seen the house long before you even considered buying it when the previous owners owned it, correct?
I moved to Kansas in 1996, and so I started becoming familiar with Emporia. The minute I saw the house, I literally was one of those slam the brakes on, turn around, park on the street, stand on the sidewalk, and go, whoa, look at this house. And a few years later, it was bought by someone in 1989, and he and his wife had an open house, Bob and Debbie Rodak, and they had an open house, and so I went through the house, and I was, like I said, it affected me in a very profound way, and I had this overwhelming desire to fix it. But it wasn't my house. I couldn't. And time went on, and I was on Zillow looking again for sensible mid-century modern houses. But I had Zillow used to send me, they still do, emails every day over new houses. And all of a sudden there was the Cross House. And I went, the Cross House is for sale? And I went and looked at it and spent a lot of time with Bob, the owner. And again, I just in the end decided this was so idiotic to take on something this big and needing so much work that I passed on it. That was in March of 2013, and I ended up buying it. I ended up closing on it a year later.
Now, did you honestly think when you took this on, did you have doubts that you would even kind of know where to begin, or that you'd even be able to do such a thing?
No, there was no doubts then and no doubts now. My background, I have a long history in architecture and design. I used to have my own architectural design business in New York City, and I did very expensive, multi-million-dollar, totally custom projects. And in a way, the Cross House is kind of easy compared to what I used to do. So, had I not had a lifetime, I'm 58 now, had I not had a lifetime worth of experience, and my father's a master carpenter, I grew up on construction sites, so luckily I have a tremendous amount of experience in this, and there's moments of fear over, I'm kind of over my head, just brief, fleeting, nauseating moments. But I must stress, they're fleeting. It'll literally be a minute and a half. It'll be like this wind kind of coming in, and I'm like, ooh, and I have to lean against a wall to keep from falling over, and then it passes. I actually find the entire project thrilling and deeply nourishing. And I have to say, if you're not deeply in love with a big old house, don't buy it, because love, as you know, is a very powerful thing. And it's very nourishing. It's very nourishing. And the house, I love it even more now than I did when I bought it. The relationship's deeper now. I know the house better. I'm past the surprise phase. Whoops, didn't see that coming. I'm past all that. And in all relationships, if you can learn about the thing that you love and get surprised and you're still in love, that's a good thing.
Sure. Well, I've heard people say that, love is really the act of giving, and I think this is the ultimate example of that the more you're giving to this house, the more you're falling in love with it. And actually, you talk on your blog about how old houses you think can actually improve your health. And I love that comparison. I think that's fantastic because I think that's really, really true. I love how you just this shining example of the more you're there, you really want to kind of give to this house. And I think what's so fascinating about this is that I think everyone, and I really do think this is universal, drives by big old houses and deep down really wishes they could save them. But the idea of actually doing it, and especially the money involved, precludes pretty much everyone from actually doing it. But you actually did it, which is just amazing. And what words of wisdom would you have for others who are contemplating a similar dream? Do you think that, don't take it on if you don't come from the background you have? Or is there something that, sort of a piece of advice you could offer people who would love to make this a reality for themselves?
Elizabeth, it's a very provocative question, and I don't even know if it can be answered. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, how does one meet the perfect partner and fall in love and develop a perfect marriage? Does anybody have an answer for that? And I don't know that it's much different. It's a mysterious mix of ingredients. Luckily I can afford it. I'm not rich, but my business does well, so I can afford it. That helps. Luckily I have a long background. That helps. The overriding ingredient, I think, as I've mentioned, is love, kind of just punch-drunk love. But I just think it's more than that. One of the strongest feelings that I have, and, there's no way to really truly explain what I'm going to say or prove it. There's no way to prove it. But I feel like my whole life, and I really feel this, my whole life I've been waiting for something, and I've been aware of that. And once I bought the Cross House, not the minute I bought it, but once I was into it for about a month, I was aware that feeling that had been there my whole life, that I was waiting for something, it had gone away. This presence in my life, this quiet presence had dissipated, and I haven't felt it once since then. And I feel very deeply, and again, there's no way to prove the following, but I feel like my whole life, all the experience I've had to date, everything led me to the Cross House, and this is the big undertaking. And, I mean, it's not rational what I'm even saying, but, if someone tells me it's not true, I would argue with them. I feel it very deeply. So in terms of advice for someone, it helps that I'm single. I'm not happy about it. I don't have kids, and I think that makes a huge difference. When I read on other people's blogs, some young couple, and they have a couple of new babies, and they've taken on some big old house, I just think those are my heroes, because I think, how in the world are you doing it?
Right.
How do you do that when you have so many demands on your time? Because my business is my own, my schedule is controlled by me. How does someone who has a full-time job working for someone else, and then they come home to a family, how do they find the time to work in an old house? So, and yet they do it. And legions of old houses across the land, as you know, have been restored by people without a lot of resources, who had very demanding lives, and yet they just plugged away at it. And 20 years later, maybe it's still not done, but it's certainly a lot better than it was. And what I love reading stories of kids who grew up in those environments, because they have these glowing, wonderful stories of this cool house that their parents bought, and how it just always got incrementally a little bit better and a little bit better, and how it changed them. They think that they're different. And I love those kind of stories. So it's, I know I haven't answered your question. I must be a politician. I haven't quite answered your question, but I've talked a lot.
No, that's wonderful. But let's go back to something you talked about, resources. The only thing I can think of when I look at this house is how much must this be costing you? And without answering that directly, can you offer some ideas for people who want to come at this but don't necessarily have the resources to do it? Are there grants that you're applying for? What kinds of resources are you tapping into to make this financially feasible for yourself?
It's Again, it's a very good question, Elizabeth, but it's also an impossible question to answer. But I can do better than my previous answer, though. It's
which was great, by the way.
Thank you. It's one of the phrases that I like to use. Basically, when you take on a big old house, or even a medium-sized old house, or even a small old house, and it needs work, your approach is going to make all the difference in the ultimate costs. And with my architecture and design background, I used to tell clients when we first met, and they would say, how much is it all going to cost? And I'd say, well, creativity doesn't really cost any money. Materials cost money. So are we going to do a bathroom for you that is full height slabs of book-matched marble, or are we going to put up 4x4 white ceramic tile? I can make either one beautiful. That's where creativity comes in. But can you see the huge difference in the cost? So in restoring an old house, if you're going to sit on the front porch and drink martinis while you direct legions of people to do work on your house, it's going to cost an incredible amount of money. But I think if a person wants to buy an old house, my house is in such bad shape that it really isn't. It would have been a very bad project for the novice. But on your website, you have lots of houses that are in poor condition, but not really catastrophic. It's actually a lot of aesthetics. You know, it's peeling old wallpaper and repainting and repairing windows. If a person has some skills and they have some time, and above all, they like working with their hands, you've got to have that. Then if you love an old house, take it on. And my house is on the National Register of Historic Places, and because of that, I was able to apply for a state grant, and I'm happy to tell you the money because it's public information. And this year I was approved for a $90,000 grant from the state.
Wow,
that's a lot of money. And I can't stress enough, it's not easy to apply for it, and once you get approved, it's not easy to get the money because it's, of course, government bureaucracy, so there's lots and lots of hoops to jump through. And I wouldn't have been able to get the grant. I actually hired a professional grant writer, and without her help, it would never have happened. And I need her help to even help me through all the hoops that I have to jump through. So it's not easy. But that grant is going to get the roofs done, and it's going to get siding issues done, and it's going to get the stained glass windows in the house. There's 40 stained glass windows in the house, which is tremendously high. I mean, most old houses are blessed if they have 2 or 3 or 4. I don't think I've ever been in an old house that had 40 stained glass windows in it before. And
it's just remarkable how much of this house was intact, considering its history when you got it.
I think of it as the miracle house because, and I know other people who have old house blogs, and I wasn't aware of that as much when I bought it as I am today because other old house bloggers write me and say, I am so jealous you still have your original staircase and you have all your stained glass windows and all your doors. And considering that the house has been a motel, a boarding house, fraternities, a tea house, that it was boarded up at one point, in 1894, I had 8 mantles and 8 overmantles. They're all still there. In 1884, I had 41 stained glass windows in the house. I have 40 today, and I know where the missing one was, and I know what it looked like because I have its match across the room. I'm missing all the original light fixtures. That's kind of ironic considering that I restore vintage lighting for a living. But I pretty much have every door. I have the original room layouts. I mean, there was 16 bathrooms installed in the house in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and some of them were pink. But when they built them, they didn't rip out trim. They just sort of buried it behind pink ceramic tile. And so the house is amazingly intact. Not 100%. But as you said, considering what it's been through and all the different uses, it's a miracle. And that had a lot to do with why I decided to buy it. Because it's so hard. I don't care about collapsed ceilings. I don't care about all new wiring having to be put in. I don't care about all new plumbing. I would prefer all new wiring. I would prefer all new plumbing. I don't care about all that, really. It's expensive, but it's okay. But, if half my mantles were missing, how do you really ever truly replace them where they look 100% right? How do you do that? I mean, you can go to a salvage yard and get a mantle, but it's not going to be quite what it's not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
mm-hmm.
and again, I just wish to stress that had a lot to do with my taking the house on. But just to quickly go back to your question about other people and other advice, again, I think if a person has, basic skills, they love working with their hands, I think it's very important if you're married, does your spouse want to do this? Because there ain't nothing worse than having a passion for an old house and living in it, and your spouse resents the house like it's a mistress to you. So, you really want to get a house. You featured a couple. I think their blog is Vivacious Victorian. You featured them.
Yes.
Ring a bell?
Amy. Mm-hmm.
Amy. And I love reading her blog, Vivacious Victorian, because, she's just so lovely and young, and her husband is, lovely and young, and it's very clear they're doing it together. And I am, pea green with envy that the two of them can share this very similar and all-consuming passion. And so, again, that's something I would really stress to people. If you're in love with an old house and you want to buy it, needs work, really, you've got to make sure your spouse feels pretty much the same way.
Right. I completely agree with that. I'm actually going to be doing a similar interview with Amy in a few weeks. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more from her about her experience, because that's my impression as well from looking at her blog. She also, like you, has a really kind of fun way of writing, and it keeps it fun and engaging.
Oh, thank you. I enjoy it.
Ross, what are you working on right now?
The work has been, I always knew the first year would be the honeymoon period, because I also strongly recommend when you buy an old house that needs work, get a construction loan bundled into the mortgage. And most banks will be happy to do that because they want to get the house as good a condition as possible. Some banks won't even finance a house unless you do a whole bunch of work. Luckily, my bank agreed to finance it, and they agreed to a substantial construction loan. But you have to do that all in the first year. So I knew the first year would be kind of the honeymoon period. Lots of activity, lots of people working on the house. And right now, there's been a lot of work. I recently did a blog post updating people, but most of it's been on the inside. So from the exterior, it doesn't look like much going on. But by the end of the year, we should have all the new roofs done, which is going to be great. And we're going to start to get, I'm going to start to get a bunch of the stained glass windows out and then restored and back. I spent an enormous amount of money really getting the radiator system. I love radiators. And I was missing some weren't hooked up. There was issues. Some were in stupid locations. I had one radiator in what's going to be my bedroom, and it was right in the middle of the biggest wall, which means you couldn't put a bed there or dresser. Because there's a radiator right there.
Right, of course.
So I had the radiator moved to the corner of the room where it should have been from day one, and now I have a place for either a bed or a dresser. But that was unbelievably expensive, and the company that did it, Modern Air, has been very gracious in letting me make payments. And I'm about 3/4 now down with that. So until that's paid, I can't be having other people work there. You got to pay your people. Work has slowed down to some degree, but there's been quite a bit of interior work being done, and I'm working on the carriage house next door because I have tenants who want to rent it. So I've done a whole series of blog posts on tearing out the Home Depot kitchen and putting back a really period-correct kitchen there.
And the carriage house is like a little mini version of the cross house, right?
Well, it's mini only by comparison. It's actually a 5-bedroom structure. I have to remind myself that my sense of scale has been forever destroyed by the enormity of the cross house. I always think of the carriage house as the tiny little thing next door, and yet it's not. It's 2 full stories, 5 bedrooms. It's a mammoth
project unto itself.
Yeah, a formal dining room, massive living room. I mean, it's big. It's in much better condition than the cross house is, and so if all goes well, I'm crossing my fingers that next year I'll have a tenant in it, and I think that'll be nice.
Yeah. Ross, can you quickly share, do you have a favorite story in all of this renovation that you've been doing that you want to share? I love your story about the peacock wallpaper. Is there anything else that jumps out at you that you think would be a fun thing for people to hear about?
The peacock wallpaper story was a lot of fun to write. When I was 16, and I was living in Florida, my mother and I used to go, of course, I've always loved lumber yards, and there was a big lumber yard, and it had a wallpaper section. And my mother wanted to go look at wallpapers, and so we were looking at wallpapers together. And we opened up with this one book, and it was by Van Leeuwen, and I think the company's still around, I'm not sure. And they had this one wallpaper, and it was these giant overscale peacock feathers, multicolor, and because it was the 70s, it was a mylar backing. So you had this silver reflective backing with these giant multicolor peacock, and we both loved it. And we looked at the price, and it was like, we gasped. There was just no way. And over a period of like a year or so, every time I'd go to the lumber yard, which doesn't exist anymore, it's now a football, baseball stadium or something, we would wander over and pull out the Van Leeuwen book. And, yes, it was a little odd for a 16-year-old boy to be looking at peacock wallpaper, but, considering that the boy is the one that grew up and bought the Cross House, it's not entirely strange. And, now that was, I don't know, what was that, 40 years ago. And while working in the Cross House last year, I started discovering remnants of the original 1894 wallpapers in the house. And there was no indication that there was any remnants left in the house. But by taking a wall down, I found original wallpaper where, the new wall had covered over the old paper. By taking out radiators, I found the original wallpapers behind them. You take out, there was a built-in dresser that wasn't original, and there was wallpaper behind it. And so I went online I went to eBay and did a search just for vintage wallpaper. And I'm scrolling down, and like the 10th wallpaper, my eyes bugged out. I instantly recognized the mylar peacock Van Leeuwen wallpaper from my childhood memories, my teenage memories. There was a single roll. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And there it was. And I thought, is it by Van Leeuwen? And they had a picture of what's the cutaway, the salvage on the edge. And I remember the name Van Leeuwen, and I looked down, and there's a picture of the salvage, and there's the Van Leeuwen name, and it was the same wallpaper. And so, of course, I put in a disturbingly high bid because I thought no one is going to outbid me on that single roll of wallpaper. And I ended up being the high bidder at like $41. And I was thrilled, and I got it, and I did a very over-the-top, funny blog post that seemed to be received well. And I only had enough for one small wall, and I wasn't sure where, so I realized in the downstairs half bath, the lower part's marble, and I thought the upper portion, I think I have enough for that one wall, and I'll paint the other three walls a complementary color. Fast forward last month, I'm on eBay, and someone put up a triple roll and a single roll of the exact same paper, but in a different colorway. And I got that too. So now I have enough to do the whole bathroom, and even though they're two different colorways, I figure, well, I can get away with that. Do one wall, one colorway, the other, and I think people will think it's just light hitting that wall differently or something.
Sure.
I don't know. And who cares? It's a funny story. Why is the wallpaper different colors? It's a funny little story. And so I'm going to have the most outrageous, over-the-top powder room, but I think it's good that powder rooms be outrageous and over-the-top. And Amy would agree 100% on that.
Definitely. I wanted to thank you so much for sharing your story. I think your approach to this is just so refreshing to hear, and I know people are going to really love it. Is there anything at in the final moments you just wanted to add?
The thought just popped in my head, and in terms of you had asked sort of what advice or whatever, insanity helps.
Insanity helps. Got it.
Insanity helps.
Perfect. That's a perfect.
And I don't mean that in a negative way, but a little bit of insanity really goes a long way when you're going to take on a big old house.
Thank you so much, Ross. I'm going to post your blog and all of the information to follow you and track your progress. In the information below this video.
Well, it's been very nice to meet you also.
Thank you again. Have a great day.